Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the David Mathas podcast. I'm really sorry about the throat scratch. I'm really excited about today's guest. Austin is somebody that I have followed with, communicated a little bit back and forth with on social media for a long time. He is the owner of Physique Development. He is a online strength coach, author, science of strength training. I knew I had to get the title right. And an educator. And guys, if you guys are following him on social media, you know everything that I just said, you know the amazing content he puts out. If you're not, do so, because it's going to definitely benefit you in the long run. But Austin, thank you so much for being here. We just found out that, kind of talking off recording, that we're both from Indiana, and kind of reminiscing about all the people that are in the industry that kind of come out of the Evansville area, which you're from, and I'm from Valparaiso and stuff. But he is now in hated Kentucky land from Indiana, but thriving and doing really well, putting out some great content. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me on, man. And yeah, I have unlimited Kentucky jokes. And my wife always jokes, because my wife's from Kentucky and her family's from Kentucky. And I always have a Kentucky joke like locked and loaded, and like almost in every situation. And she's always like, "You're outnumbered here," and my answer is like, "I'm faster than everyone here." It's like, I'm in no way worried.
You're in enemy territory, but you're conditioned more than anybody else. So I think you're going to.
Oh, dude, it's not to like bring any violence into this, but it's like, you're bringing a gun to a knife fight, and it's like, I'm all right here, And now if I go to now it's different in like South Central, Western Kentucky. Now, as you get into more Eastern Kentucky, I would hold off on the jokes, and not only out of respect.
They don't take time to them, do they?
Not only out of respect for just Appalachia in general, but like just, they're not going to have the same level of like,
I mean, that's
tolerance.
That is straight up blue collar area, right?
Oh yeah.
Sure. But you got to respect it about them. And anybody listening to Kentucky, we're just joking around. We love y'all. So it's just a couple Indiana boys here who grew up with a rivalry with Kentucky. So, well, I want to talk a little bit about your book. I want to talk about some other topics, but I want the audience to kind of get an idea, and myself too, of how did you get to where you're at? Like, what has your path been? What got you interested in training, nutrition? Where did that all start from?
Yeah, thank you. So with me, it came from, a very similar background to most, I would say, where it went from, being heavily involved in athletics, being around sports my whole life. And then when sports ended, I was working at a gym throughout high school, and the same gym really throughout college, until Physique Development was in a place where I could stop working there. So I worked there for about 6 years, cleaning toilets, putting away weights, personal training, everything under the sun, making protein shakes. Yeah, man, just those entry-level jobs that build character and humility. And I had a handful of those. And so, when I was at that gym, I graduated high school. I was in college by this time. By the time my second year of university rolled around, folks at my gym were competitive bodybuilders and physique athletes. I had never heard of any of it before. And this was around 2013. So like, this is kind of when men's physique really kind of showed up on the scene. And so from there, like, and I was following like the Steve Cooks, the Matt Christianers, those type of people that were kind of in that space at the time. And I was like, damn, these people have unrealistic, like crazy cool physiques, and, seemed like, and I'd follow that, I watched every video they put out, and I was just super interested in them and kind of their story and the content they were sharing. And so, I had great education growing up, as far as strength training went, as far as lifting went. I was always really blessed with people around me who really, really did know what they were talking about. high school strength coach who was, CSCS and US Olympic weightlifting certified, like, a very qualified beginning, which is very lucky.
Very unlike what most high school strength coaches and football coaches and stuff are like nowadays. I mean, there's so many people that are misguided from an early age, and it sets up poor habits and it sets up dangerous habits along the way. So I'm glad you had that.
Yeah. And so I started to train when I was like going to the gym when I was 12. And, I started lifting with my brother, who's a couple of years older than I am. And he from the beginning, I remember the first session, we went to the local YMCA, the first session, that I remember, the first workout, I should say, we went through, he had already kind of started to be educated by, our strength coach,
Okay.
and which we shared. And he was then instilling that information into me at 12 and kind of saying like, hey, we're going to start with just body weight stuff. And then we're going to have good form and technique first. And then, once I think you're ready for actual weight, we'll start to load some things up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so he really instilled, I was very lucky too, because like he was kind of like, he's the big brother, right? He sort of oversaw my safety and really saw that like, oh, this kid is fairly strong and well put together, at 12. And it's like, I think he could be his worst enemy here. So he really protected me in that way and introduced me to a lot of things in the gym. And then I got into, strength conditioning in 8th grade. That's when it kind of like starts for us where I grew up.
Okay.
And you're kind of introduced, they have sort of like an enrollment introduction for middle schoolers going into high school. That way, you're kind of ready for what the weight room is going to bring when you get to high school sports.
Yeah.
And so that, I got into lifting more and more and more throughout that time. And then it became something I did for fun and something to do to get better at sports, which then sort of like we fast forward, sports end for me, and I'm in university and I'm working at this gym. And
where'd you go to school at?
So I went to, kind of a mixed, so I spent part of my time at Ball State.
Oh, nice.
And then part of my time at University of Southern Indiana in Evansville.
Okay.
So that's where I graduated from technically.
Excellent. I spent many weekends at Ball State during.
Yeah, man, so I actually grew up, a lot of my childhood was spent in Muncie because my grandfather was an assistant head football coach at Ball State from 96 till 2006 or 7. Nice. So really, I mean, I grew up in the locker room there and really just hung around and I went to a lot of the practices and just hung around the players, and it was awesome. We got my brother and I got
I take it you played football then in high school.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it was kind of like a necessary thing in our family to do. Yeah.
For me, it was baseball and basketball. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Football, especially. Yeah. I mean, I know the area, so I understand it. For the people that are not from that area, football's kind of big around there. So
yeah, football's big around there, and high school sports are taken pretty seriously. And so yeah, it's pretty big in that part of the world. And so I started to, lift more for physique reasons and just staying in shape. And I enjoyed it. I did it as sort of like a, recreational thing, and really just a way to channel, energy, right? Channel stress or anxieties or things I didn't quite understand at the time, but I consistently just lifted just because. And then, I got talked into, hey, there's a show coming up in 6 weeks. You should try and do it.
6 weeks.
And it was the Kentucky Muscle in 2013.
6-week prep. That always goes well.
And it did go well, actually. So
nice.
Yeah, luckily it did. And that's kind of like where it all starts for me and kind of like what got me into all of this. So I went through that 6-week prep. It actually did go well. Luckily I was already in pretty decent shape. So 6 weeks was enough time.
Makes a big difference.
And so, yeah, it made a big difference. And so, I entered 3 divisions. I was able to enter the teen, collegiate, and because I was 19 at the time, teen, collegiate, and open. And I won all three. And
Nice.
I was like,
Not
after
bad
that,
show in 6 weeks.
not bad. Yeah. And
that'll get anyone hooked right there.
yeah, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm pretty decent. So this was fun. And okay, I guess I'll start doing this. This kind of gives me something to do that's competitive that I missed because I stopped, when I stopped playing sports. And so, from there, that competing taught me a lot about myself in a lot of ways, right? I think anyone who's gotten into shape or competed or really did something that's physically challenging that tests them in a lot of different ways, which I know you're sharing more and more on your social media, like it builds character, it builds discipline. And it was something that I needed when I was, 18, 19, 20 years old. And I'm glad I did it. And, and so I went through a few shows. I think my fourth show was nationals. It was North Americans in 2014.
Oh, wow.
And and then that was my fourth show in which I won my pro card at that show. And
North Americans is actually going on right now, isn't it?
I don't know. Yeah, it's sometime around this.
Yeah, I think
time of year. I think
a couple friends' stories that North Americans are going on right now. So
okay. Yeah, I don't.
Kind of ironic. That's where you won your pro card. So
yeah, I don't follow it as closely anymore. But yeah, and that's where I won my pro card. That was about 9.5 months after I started competing. So it all happened really pretty quickly in terms of, and that's sort of been a theme of like, when I pick something up, I sort of like most of us in this space who are kind of ambitious, you're like, now I'm obsessed and I'm going to be the best that I can be at this. And I'm going to do everything I can to do it.
It's a healthy obsession, but it definitely becomes an obsession. It's like, I find a lot of people get driven to physique sports or something for many reasons that you just said. One of them is finding another outlet for that competitiveness that is now no longer in team sports, like you're out of high school. And so that's where I find a lot of the early 20s people are like, this is something I can do that I can still, flame that competitive fire that I have inside of me and everything. And also people that are just very type A, right? They're very type A, process driven individuals and stuff. And they like that clear cut path, clear cut goal to shoot for and everything. So yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying from that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think there's a point too, where it's like, we all need a fight. We all need a challenge. We all need something to show up to. We all need a responsibility. Right. And that was a big thing for me, and I had lost a lot of that from all the responsibilities I had when I, was playing sports, because other people were depending on me. And I felt that pressure, right? I felt that need to show up. And I felt that, I had coaches yelling at me if I wasn't going. They knew my talent, potential, and whatever else. So if I wasn't given everything I had, I was getting screamed at, berated, essentially. So
humans are meant to be tested. I mean, you don't get stronger unless pressure is applied to you. And I don't know if you've read it yet. I just got done reading David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me.
I haven't read it yet. Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
Highly suggest. I know that you would enjoy it. But he talks about this. He talks about the need to push yourself past your perceived limits, right? I mean, that's how humans grow. We don't grow by staying content. We don't grow by staying comfortable. We grow by pushing ourselves. And most of the time, our mind is what holds us back. And so having that something to push you and stuff, that makes, that's why you look at top CEOs and companies and all these things. These guys are not lazy individuals. These guys are out there pushing themselves. I know a lot of CEOs out there run triathlons. They run marathons. Like, they're constantly looking for that next edge. And you don't get that edge unless you're willing to push yourself and go to those uncomfortable places. So
yeah, and it's more,
I think you'd really like it.
Yeah, I will. I absolutely will. I have an Audible credit I need to use this month. So
and you know what? I actually had a former client of mine send me the Audible link, because he said, if you like the book, the Audible is so much better, because Goggins actually, like, in between chapters, talks about stuff in his own voice and his own words. He said it's amazing. So I'm gonna re-listen to it here in probably about a month when I finish a couple other books I'm reading. So
yeah, I have habit of doing that as well. Yeah, and I think it's something that just you're mentioning like the CEO thing. Like I think it's more or less you see patterns within success, right? And you see or people or things that become successful, and it's less about the thing they're trying to achieve, right? It's less about them getting first in the marathon and more so the things they learn about themselves while achieving or striving for first in the marathon, right? It's
Process.
the fact that they got first. Yes, the fact they got first in the marathon, it doesn't take their business to the next level, right? Not necessarily, unless they're a marathon coach or you get sponsorships or whatever. But it's what they're learning about themselves and what they're learning about the process of achieving something at a high level. And I think that's something that really sort of is reflected in a lot of ways in what competing was for me early on. And I had never really felt that sense of control before until I started to compete. I didn't know that I could necessarily dictate I didn't know I could really dictate the successes to come with my full autonomy. Like I didn't know that I had that sort of ability to manipulate my environment, my potential, my, where my energy was going, what I cared about. Like I mean, I know it sounds ignorant, but I really didn't know until I took a step back and started to achieve things and sort of become weirdly known for doing it. And it was like, this is my first time at this. I'm sort of like ignorantly new to the whole process of it.
Well, and that's what I think people need to understand about anything with challenging yourself. Like you have to take ownership that, like in something like physique sports, right? It's all on you. Your success, your failure is all on your ability. And most people are ignorant going into anything new. And that's just like ignorance isn't necessarily a derogatory thing. It's you don't know unless you're willing to put yourself out there and try it and really push yourself to that level. And I mean, one of the things you found that you learned, the lesson is that you have a hell of a lot more in you than you think, right?
Yeah.
And you learned how to assess that perceived barrier and not let yourself quit just because, our minds are what hold us back more than anything, right? You physically can go, you can withstand hunger on a prep, right? You can withstand training on very low energy. All that stuff that's not going to kill you. It's not going to hurt you. But up here, that's where most people I find really, really start to fail. And that's, I'll raise my hand. I mean, I am one that my whole goal right now is to just callous my mind, get myself harder and stronger and more mentally tough moving forward and setting different challenges. I mean, you said you saw my social media. I've got some challenges from a physical standpoint because I've been injured quite a bit lately. And some things that I want to try to push myself towards that I haven't really done in a long time, right? But it could be for anybody. If someone's wanting to do a physique show, right? They probably are scared. They're probably ignorant, probably don't understand everything that's going to go into it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right? And that doesn't mean that if you hit one of those sticking blocks or one of those roadblocks that come up that you shouldn't just keep pushing past it. But too many people, we live in a very comfortable society, in my opinion, which is a good and bad thing. There's benefits from it. I mean, listen, there's a lot of things that I wouldn't want to give this thing up for, right? I phone for you guys that are listening. But there's a lot of times where I think that holds me back. And that comfort is kind of setting us back as humans in a bit. And we have to have these challenges. And athletes I see are the ones, athletes and type A personalities are the ones that really grasp that and they run with it. And they don't want to stop. They want to keep hammering away and see how far they can take themselves. And those are the ones that are usually the most successful people in the long run.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think in reflection as well, or to add to things that you're, mentioning alongside callousing your mind, which I know is a kind of a Goggins thing, if I'm not mistaken. And then, like a Jocko thing, which I know you're reading through Extreme Ownership, and I've read through his books as well. And yeah, there you go. And again, like that was another thing too, that I had taken early on. Because growing up, like I was driven when it came to sports,
Yeah.
and I was pushed because people around me push me, but I was not someone who was necessarily running sprints after practice to be better. Like I just wasn't. I showed up. No, I didn't. I never really did. And I mean, fortunately, I didn't need to at the time. But that isn't to say that I think that actually worked against me later on in life. And I had to be punched in the face by that more so than anything, right? Growing up, I played up in sports. Like I played a year or two more advanced growing up. Like I skipped or I skipped T-ball and went right to pitching machine. I skipped touch football and went right into tackle when I was 5.
What was that punch in the face for you?
The punch in the face was the fact that when you get out of these controlled environments where their sole job is to motivate you and to get you to that finish line, when they're removed, who are you? How do you show up? And that was when sports ended for me. That was my punch in the face. That was an identity crisis where I was like, wait, who am I without this crutch in my life making me show up day in and day out, right? It wasn't the fact that and it wasn't until later in high school when I essentially had to quit sports due to head injuries. At that point I started to reflect on, okay, now I can think about it now, but I didn't know it necessarily then, but what are the things that actually drive me forward, right? What are the things that actually continue to challenge me and make me better at something? I didn't know what that was going to be, but better at something. And, I remember even after sports ended, I was like, well, I know I got up at 6 a.m. for morning lifts when I was playing sports. So I kept that going. I kept, even in high school, I lifted before school and after school. I didn't know why, but I did it. And, I was basically at the gym at 5:36 a.m. before school with all my friends' parents, essentially, who were there before work. Yeah. And then after school, I went to the gym with all my friends because that's when they went. And so it's I kept that going. I didn't really understand why. But the punch in the face was when sports ended and I got to university.
Right.
Or really when sports ended for me was I was still in high school. And I had spent all of my academic career essentially underachieving and sort of, that sort of cliche of, well, if he applied himself, I think he would be better than he is. And he's smarter than he gives himself credit. But also I had a lot of teachers who just were very blunt and said hey man, this isn't for you. Maybe you should try to pursue getting a scholarship for, with athletics or something. And maybe that'll push you to get a degree in something and have a half decent, professional life. And that was sort of rooted in my mind of well, this path isn't necessarily mine. And so when the physical pursuit ended, when sports ended for me, and that was sort of what I saw as my ticket to college. Well, when that ended, there was no more ticket. It was just reality of years of underachieving in academics, years of not giving any effort towards it. And the reality of, well, I'm kind of fucked, right. I'm kind of screwed here because I don't have the grades. I don't have this test scores to even really get into university. And luckily, through different opportunities and different situations, I was able to get into university. I started at Ball State. And, that first semester was really when it was kind of during that continuous long duration punch in the face. Right. And during that first semester, I, got a 4.0 and it just went from there. That was that was before I started competing. So that was the first time that I had ever really taken control over something and took extreme ownership of my situation. And that was immediately reflected upon the success that I had in that moment. And I was like, oh, wait,
you didn't
I can actually do this
yourself. You didn't do any of that. You said, you know what, this is the mission at hand. This is what I need to do. I'm going to do it. I'm going to push through it and do the very best job I can. and ended up with a 4.0. I mean,
yeah. And so I went essentially from doing no homework, no studying in high school at all. And I just got the grades I needed to play sports. And then, enter university, I did every bit of homework, every bit of extra credit, 4 or 5 hours of study a day, and, on and on and on, day in and day out. And that, and the fact that it obviously helped that I could see the reflection of result in the mirror, right? I could see that, oh, this actually does get me good grades. Oh, this actually made me the student that people actually copy off of now, instead of
tangible evidence, right?
It's tangible evidence, right? Where it's like, it was the first time I actually remember it, which was it's just crazy to me. Like the first time I was in chemistry in university at Ball State. And it was the first time that it just felt so good. So I remember the classroom. I almost remember the smell that was in the room, this musty old, lecture hall of this building that needed to be tore down. And, it was the first time that anyone ever like said, someone was like asking a question or like looking for an answer. And they said, oh, ask him. He's smart. Or like, he's the one I copy off of. And I was like, what? Yeah, it was kind of like, oh, all right, man. All right. That's cool. All right. Well, now I'm identifying more and more as this. I almost took that as more of like a badge of honor. I took that as like, oh, this is my thing now. I'm going to own this. I'm going to take responsibility for this.
Yeah. So
you push it forward.
One door close on you from the athletic standpoint, and you didn't sulk. You didn't,
I sulked for a while. I'll be honest.
Well, but
not for long.
You don't let it take over. I mean, that's natural. Everybody, like, you got to have a little time to do that, right? But you didn't swim in that pool. You got out. You focused on something else, and you said something back about lifting in high school. They're lifting before school, lifting after school. You didn't know why. That just really just hammers away a point that I like to talk to people about, clients and other people, and just like, you don't always have to understand the why with everything you're doing right at first. Now, what you were doing was setting you up for something further later on. It was that dedication, that determination, that drive, that discipline that sets you up for something greater later on in life, right? You went in, you're like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I just want to do it. It feels right to me. You trusted your gut, and that discipline that you gained over the years of doing that in high school, maybe it didn't translate into you going and playing sports in college, but you know what? It translated into something better, probably, and
I'm better off for
now, and something that's going to last you throughout your lifetime. So just anybody that's listening to this, like, you might be doing something now and you're like, I don't really see why or how this is going to help. Like, granted, it's not something dangerous or stupid, right? It's probably going to translate into something else later on in life. And it might not be that thing you think it might be. Like for Austin, he was lifting weights, right? Just a kid in there lifting weights. Never thought that would translate into him being more disciplined when he got to college to study his ass off to get that 4.0, to get his credentials, to open up a business like he's doing and helping thousands of people every day, right? With content that he's putting out. So we don't always know what we're doing or why we're doing it, but that's where faith comes in, right? You have to have faith that you're doing something that's going to benefit you down the road and hopefully benefit others down the road as well, which obviously is what you're doing. So
and just kind of round out that thought there. I mean, in the progression of that was the reflection I saw of that work then bled into the confidence that I was gaining in myself, and the control I felt with competing, right? So competing for me was, and really training nutrition for me, it wasn't the competing necessarily, but the control over my training, the control over my nutrition, the control I never felt before over my own life and the way it was going. That was sort of reflected back onto me, and I was able for the first time to control something during a time where I didn't feel like I had much control over anything else. Right. And especially emotionally and everything else going on. And so I that was such a big thing for me in removing myself from friends and relationships I didn't need to be in, from you name it, everything that was just not productive in my life, I got rid of immediately. It was just like, I took extreme ownership. I took extreme responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to sort of like self-audit, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, and go through, and how do I navigate this? And, I think that's what competing was for me. And that's why I say was, because it's in the past for me. I don't plan on competing really again. And I don't, that was never really like the goal of starting competing. Wasn't ever, I never knew, again, I never knew where it was going. I just knew I started to do it. I was good at it.
That you wanted to undertake.
It brought good things, valuable traits to my life that I still use to this day. And, when I felt it had ran its course, and I was kind of like, all right, I don't need this as my crutch any longer. Like, I'd used it as a crutch for a long time to keep me on track, but then I didn't need it anymore.
That's a really interesting way of putting it. It was your crutch. And you also said something a few minutes ago about you had to take an audit of your life. I think that's really, really crucial to hammer away at right here, is that so many people, I think, use competing as their identity, and they use it as a crutch, right? Where they don't want to give it up. Like, they're like, if I stop competing or whatever, they don't even really like it anymore. It's miserable for them. It's messing with their family life, their relationships, their job, whatever. But they're afraid that if they stop doing that, they lose their identity, and they lose that crutch, right? Whereas maybe they need to do what you did, and take a step back and take that audit of their life. Like, are the people that they're associating with, are they really the healthiest for their long-term success? Do you really like to still compete? I mean, listen, competing's tough. Like, it's not for, I tell people that, I prep and stuff for their first show. I'm like, listen, if you decide you get done with this first show and you don't ever want to compete again, that is okay. Like, take audit of how you're feeling, the people you're associating with, and just take ownership of your life moving forward. Because there's a lot of people I encounter, and I'm sure you do too, that probably just, they're like, oh, I've got to compete next year. I got to compete next year. I got to do this and this and this. It's like, why? Like, for 95% of the population out there, it's just a hobby. It's just a hobby. And if it is interfering with your life or what you want to do with your life, stop. It's not the end of the world. It's not your identity. And so many people get caught up in that crutch of, I'm a competitor, or I'm a basketball player, football player, I'm a musician, like all that stuff. That's not your identity. That's just something you do. That's something you hopefully enjoy doing or don't enjoy doing. And if you don't anymore, get the hell out of it. You evolve as a human. I mean, you saw a lot of evolution just from the time of being 12 years old to being introduced to weight training and stuff to, where you're at right now. How old are you now?
27.
27. That's 15 years. Think of everything that's evolved in your life. You went from being interested in weight training to an athlete, to having that taken away, to doing your first competition, to getting a 4.0, to graduate. Like, there's so many different elements of life, and you shouldn't have a crutch. You shouldn't be pigeonholed to one specific thing that defines you. And I think your evolution proves that. So
yeah, thank you. And I think too, it, and when I reflect on a lot of that, it really comes down to, you aren't that thing. You aren't that identity, right? You aren't your political view. You aren't your whatever. You are you, and you are, I think it's, I found it to be easier for myself, or I don't say easier, but more positive for myself to more or less identify with, like, I'm an empathetic person. I'm a kind person. I'm an understanding person. I'm someone who listens. I'm someone who, that's how I identify with something, right? I'm not, I professionally am a personal trainer. I'm professionally, X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. But that's not, you could remove me, and that's given me what's given me a lot of confidence and peace of mind, which I'm always kind of searching for peace of mind in anything that I do, is the fact that I'm very confident that if you removed me from everything I know today to be what my life is, it would suck. But I'm very confident that I would ultimately be fine. I could start a new career. I could learn whatever I needed to learn. I could do, because again, it's being more process driven rather than goal oriented, right? It's or the end result driven, right? It's like, it's the process that got me here, and it's the process that is going to continue to take me where I'm going. And I think the more, as you were saying, like the more we define ourselves and pigeonhole ourselves into this singular existence, this singular thing that we do, quote unquote, the more you actually limit whatever it could be.
Yeah.
Right. It's not, and that's kind of goes back to, you know, the people we were talking about earlier of like high achieving people and why they challenge themselves and why they're actually probably more on average setting the pace rather than following someone else, right? People that, yeah, they're moving the needle forward at their own pace. And it's usually in some sort of adjacent direction to a competitor or an idea that someone else had or motivation they got from someone else or within, right? And again, like I think it's important to be able to better identify with who you are outside of what you do for a living, outside of your political or religious views, outside of your whatever, like who are you as you stand or sit there?
So at the end of the day, all that stuff could be stripped away. Anything could be taken away at any moment. And it's like, what's left at that point? And that's a very healthy way to look at it. And I think more people, I think a lot of people are going to gain a lot from just hearing you say that and stuff. It's true, guys. It really is true. But well, let's dive into a couple topics real quick. I think this is a very important discussion. I know this wasn't the discussion we were planning on having, but I think it kind of turned into a pretty damn good discussion there. But let's talk a little bit about strength training. All right. Now, you did a post a little while ago about the benefits of resistance training on your brain health. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think people, when they think about resistance training, they only think about improving their muscle, right? Getting bigger muscle or getting a stronger muscle, something like that, which is obviously, that's a whole nother topic we can go into about strength versus hypertrophy and everything like that. But from a benefit standpoint, from just brain health, what is that post all about, and what did you find?
So, brain health and cognition and longevity and quality of life is very important and near and dear to my heart, because it's something that we know has a genetic factor in it. We know that it can be passed on from past generations. And my family definitely struggles with cognitive health, brain health detriment across their lifespan. I've lost numerous aunts and uncles and family members from Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive decline over the years. Like over the past 5 years, I've lost a handful of them to the same thing, right? Which to me, it's like understanding sort of the underlying physiology, underlying genetic potential of me getting those things, in the future. It's like
knowing your
we know there's
and stuff,
understanding kind of your ancestry and your family history from a standpoint of at least that's concerned. Even just your family history in terms of your health, right? More broadly, I think it's important that you understand that, people have higher risk of getting Alzheimer's, dementia, people who have higher risk of getting, suffering a cardiac event or heart disease, like even things like macular degeneration and things that, can be protected by strength and resistance training, exercise in general, proper diet. So that was it was an important section of the book for me to write or to include in the book, because it's like so often, I think we get lost, especially within our little corner of the space in the industry. We get so lost in maximizing building muscle. Like that's all we care about. And it's sort of exhausting to me. And I think for a lot of people from the outside looking in, and because I've been fortunate to spend time traveling and spend a lot of time around people who aren't in the industry at all. There's someone who they're people who are just normal everyday folks who may work out, they may exercise a couple times a week, but they're just normal people going about their normal lives, which, is so refreshing to spend your time around, because it's kind of like gets you out of everything that you deal with on a daily basis, right? And
we talk about training and nutrition so much throughout the day. It's like,
I don't even talk about anything else.
I don't even really listen to fitness podcasts anymore. I mean, there's a couple that I do because they're good friends of mine, but like I'm listening to other stuff because I need a break. I need a break from that.
Yeah. And I would agree. And, one thing that I picked up during just being out in the world and experiencing life and being around people is they're sort of discouraged by what we idolize, right? Within our corner, right? They're kind of discouraged by bodybuilders. They're kind of discouraged by these insanely well put together, lean, extremist people that we look up to as our people who motivate us, right? And so I found there's sort of and that's not always true, but there was enough of a divide from oh, well, and that's why they didn't train. That's why they were kind of discouraged or detoured away from maybe stepping foot into the gym or taking that next step to improving their body composition or building a little bit more muscle mass to improve their metabolic health or something like that, their brain health, just their quality of life in general. And so it was important to me to almost write this book from a reflection sense of, look, building muscle is a very, very cool byproduct of resistance training, of strength training. Very cool byproduct of it. But it's not the whole thing. It's not the whole story. And it's not the only benefit you get, right? There's a cascade and a myriad of benefits that come from strength training. And it was very important for me to highlight the neurocognitive, neurophysiology benefits, the mental health benefits, the benefits that lie with that outside of just building pure raw protein, right? Pure lean mass, right? That we kind of always see circulating, and everything in context of sacrifice for muscle. And it's well, that's for the 99%. I wanted to write a book for the 99%, not for the 1%, because I feel that's just a giant underserved, really just underserved market of, if there's 100 people in your gym, there's probably 3 or 4 people in there that
are actually,
follow influencers and really care, follow, know who Jay Cutler even is, and whatever, right? Or whoever, insert your own, goal bodybuilder or whatever. There's very few people really in the gym that even know any of that or care about that. The rest of them are just, normal people, just mothers, fathers, people who are just in the gym because they're I know this is a good thing. My doctor said I need to lift. I need to be in the gym. I don't really know
really why it is,
but they're there.
Do it.
They're there, and so I wanted to basically write a reference textbook or a reference handbook for the everyday person who that 95 to 99% of people who, we're not necessarily writing these articles for online, we're not necessarily writing these articles in fitness magazines for, we're targeting the 1%ers, or the 5%ers to be a Rich Piana, dedication there. But so that was a big thing. And brain health was one of those things that I thought, what is something that is near and dear to my heart? What is something that is so beneficial from strength training that we can gain? Yeah. And it's longevity of life, it's quality of life. it's reduced risk of so many disease states, conditions, certain cancers, and neurocognitive decline from like what we can get that from strength training. So I want to highlight that. I want to get that out more out there. So where if someone doesn't care about going in the gym to just build muscle and get jacked and be shredded, and because there's so many people that just don't care about that, but there's so many people, everyone cares about better quality of life, right?
Listen, I mean, I was there when I was younger. I did not think about this stuff. I just was like, how can I get the most muscle, right? But to me, one of the biggest benefits, other than actual muscle tissue that you can build, is the confidence weight training can give you.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in women. I find that women I work with that maybe they've tinkered around with it a little bit, but nothing seriously, or they've never done it and they've just been cardio bunnies or yoga, yoga people, which is absolutely great still. When they start getting on a resistance training program and they start progressing little by little, that confidence that they know their body can do more and their mind can do more than they think carries over into so many aspects of their life, and men too, of course. But that's where I see it a lot more beneficial is in women, especially with that confidence. Because listen, everybody's got this picture, like you were talking about, picture of bodybuilders and stuff. People don't want to go into gyms because they think that everybody's in there throwing around weights and dropping weights and grunting and everything, and it can be intimidating. And that confidence that they gain, women and men, when they go in there, they push themselves, it triggers something in their brain, and it definitely carries over into their personal life, their professional life, maybe some new goal that they want to set, that they now feel like, oh my gosh, I could actually probably achieve this.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And I, again, like a big motivation of how the book was written was to sort of address the most common things where people are the most common issues people are usually facing in terms of being intimidated or not understanding how to do a lift, or not understanding, maybe what they're doing or how to set up a program, or how to organize their or structure their training. So all that stuff's in there. And I would agree to, in the, like everything from my Instagram bio to the tagline of our company, it has the word empower in it. So in my Instagram bio, it's like empowering clients through strength training and education. And our tagline of our business, empower, it's in train, empower, educator, something of the sort, right? It's within every bit of what we do is to really just the goal is to not only empower yourself, but empower other people to gain that confidence that we've seen time and time again, not only through ourselves, but through our clients. It's like, if you only understood how you would feel by taking responsibility and ownership of this and challenging yourself and gaining confidence and feeling empowered to do the next thing, because now you're not as fearful of potential failure because you've spent enough man hours, or woman hours training and challenging and making yourself extremely uncomfortable, and there's so much to gain from that you and I definitely understand, and we're continuing to learn daily, but it's something that we try to like teach clients and people who maybe have not come across that before.
One of the first things I tell new clients when they come on is, listen, as much as I would love to have you for 2 or 3 or 4 years, right? Most likely that's probably not going to happen. I need you. I want you. My goal is to feel like when you leave, when you're done, you can sustain this yourself long term. And that's where that empowerment that you're talking about comes in. It's like when you have to educate people. Like you can't just throw numbers out there and be like, hit these numbers, because you're never going to grow them as individuals, and then they don't have the ability to branch off and help other people. It's this branch approach, right? Like you help one person, they get empowered, maybe they help 2 people, then maybe those people do it. And that's what's going to change society right now. I mean, I think people's one of the biggest struggles I find with people from a mental standpoint is just not really, how am I trying to say this? Not really, I guess, believing that what they want to achieve is achievable in any other way except for some of these extreme ways that they've seen all growing up, right? The extreme 500 calorie diets, or building muscle by eating 6,000, 10,000 calories a day. There's all these extremes, and you empower people by narrowing their scope, bringing them in closer and educating them on what are the real things that's going to work for you: sustainability, adherence, consistency, those three things, and of course patience, and getting people to see the bigger picture, right? Not falling back and sacrificing what they want long term for what they want now. That's one of the harder parts to do. But when you start gaining their confidence, when you start educating them and stuff, and talking to them about some of the things that you've mentioned and stuff like that, that helps them kind of narrow stuff in and really stay focused on the goal at hand. Because listen, we get distracted by so much stuff, right? There's so many things coming at us all the time. One of the hardest things to do is keep your focus. And I think when you can kind of illustrate the other benefits besides just growing muscle tissue to people that weight training has, that proper nutrition has, it gets them to start thinking differently. And when their brain chemistry starts thinking differently, endless possibilities from that point.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And I think there's this grouping of, there's sort of like always this black and white approach to things, right? Which is sort of breeds extremism on either side, right? And we sort of group together all of these things, or we see one way to do something, or maybe there's only a couple ways to get there, and it's usually grouped in with something extreme, and usually because it's the loudest version of what someone did to get somewhere. Yeah. And again, extremisms are celebrated. They're clickbait. They're all the things that drive our current internet culture, and that isn't really where the best, relative to me, the best parts of life exist, right? Like the most of your life, the best parts of your life happen within the middle and happen within the mundane with, and this is something I know we teach clients, is restriction and a framework around, or strict discipline and framework around things that you want to do and you don't want to do, and keeping those promises you make to yourself breeds the success you want to achieve, right? Yeah. And it doesn't really matter what you're doing or what route you're taking. It kind of just comes down to staying the course, as you said, being consistent, creating sort of limiting constraints around the path, not removing all things that bring you joy, because that's not the goal, right? And that's why I'm talking about like grouping, right? We talk about, so we sort of like group these things together mistakenly, because, it's like, well, that's what you have to do, right? To be successful, you have to work 100-hour weeks. You have to get rid of all your friends, all the joy in your life, because that's how you get success, or that's how you, if you want to get in shape, you have to, remove all joy, all food, all, social interaction, whatever else, right?
Definitely can't eat carbs and still,
right,
weight, right?
Can't do that. So it's sort of like this grouping of, and I think it's easier to group it together, right? There's something to, and there's an exhaustive nature to having to individually break apart each element of a process and critically think about it. Like, it's much easier to create a black and white scope of, well, it's either this or that, it's either I'm all in or I'm all out,
right?
Rather than individually taking a sort of like reverse engineering, like break it apart into its individual parts and pieces, and see what you want to do with those things, man. Like, if you still like, that's why, how many clients you have that got in shape, but also drank beer, right? Like, or hung out with their friends, or went to family gatherings, or did all these things that were just a normal person, but it's more about breaking those things apart.
I want them to do that stuff. And I know you do. Like, there's no point of trying to achieve a goal if it's not going to be in a sustainable manner long term, right? So why don't we learn how to incorporate that stuff in moderation and make it fit into your goal? I mean, I have people that they're as soon as they come to me, they're like, I'm not giving up alcohol. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Let's figure out a way to make this fit into your long-term plan and stuff. And I think, you said something just a little bit ago. And I think it kind of goes along the lines of people are too quick to let themselves off the hook. Like they're too quick to quit. And that's where some of that mental toughness comes in. And what weight training can do for that is understanding, progress takes time, right? You're not going to be able to make strides every day, right? You're not going to be able to progress every day. But if those days start adding up, you can start progressing within weeks and then within months. And that just gives you the confidence to just not quit. And that's where I find a lot of people are like, this is not going well. I didn't lose as much weight this week. Something must be wrong. I need to quit. And that's a weak-minded approach right there.
Yeah. And something I learned when I was competing, especially really early on, I never understood this sense of, I understood that if you put in work, you got a result, but there was a sense of like a timeline that I didn't quite understand. And to kind of make my point, when I first stepped on stage and I first saw the images of me on stage, of me and, going through my posing routine and like displaying my physique in the best way that I could, I saw, muscles that I didn't quite know I had, or a density of muscle I didn't quite knew existed. But what I took from that was sort of like not only amazement of like, damn, that's me and I did that, but also that the reps are what got me there. Like it was the reps, the sets, the workouts, the months and the years of training leading up to that point. Like it was all about the reps that got me there. And I think, that's a great way to sort of, at least for me, to kind of look at it as like, if to get to that end result, man, it's about the reps that got you there. And day in and day out, you have an opportunity to do more reps, right? You have an at bat, you have a shot at goal every single day, right? And some days you can take, you can have more reps, you can take more shots on goal, right? And that's every, if you're a content creator, if you're a coach, right? Every piece of content, every video you put out is a shot on goal. It's a rep, right? You're getting better, and you're putting yourself out there to, again, build something into the future. And you don't always have to know, kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, like you don't always have to know what that is, right? When I first started putting videos out in 2014, 15, I didn't know what that was leading to. I didn't know that I'd be here right now talking to you and have, all this, whatever's going on, right? At all.
Look back at my earlier YouTube videos sometimes and I'm like, what the hell was I doing?
I go back and watch them all the time. It makes me, what makes me laugh, it makes me cringe. It makes, I appreciate where I'm at now. And it's a very grounding experience of like, and almost an immediate reminder of, okay, putting yourself out there and putting in the reps does lead somewhere, right? And it's not, and I think the most important thing, and I just had this conversation with Andrew Coates on his podcast, and you're not entitled to what that turns into, right? You're not guaranteed anything from that. And I think you have to understand that going in, right? Just because whether it's a physique competition, just because you followed your diet, you've hit all your workouts, doesn't mean you deserve to win. Just because you put videos out and you're trying to build something doesn't mean you are entitled or deserve anything from that.
100%.
It's just a byproduct of you doing it well enough for long enough and getting some luck in whatever else involved.
Well, and I think that is important for people to understand that, like, hard work doing everything right doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win. I mean, I learned that lesson many times in the military. Like you can execute the quote unquote perfect mission and people can still die or the objective still not be hit. I mean, that should not dissuade you from trying to do the right thing every single day and to stay on plan. But it also, like, when you get to the end and you might not succeed, maybe you don't win the show, right? That doesn't mean it was a failure, or maybe you did not get this or that or what. It doesn't mean it was a failure. Actually, one of my favorite, and I know I'm going to butcher this quote, but it basically kind of goes, it was from Kobe Bryant. He goes, the end is not the point. The journey is the point. It's everything along the way. Because whatever you achieve, say you do win first in that show, right? Okay, great. That's done. That excitement's over with. What did you learn along the way? And it's that resolve, it's that resiliency that we need to build up in our minds. And I really, really feel, and I know you do too, weight training, proper nutrition, proper rest and recovery, all that builds up that resiliency over time and understanding, like, listen, you can have the best training program laid out, right? Say you're trying to put 50 pounds on your squat or something like that, right? You could go through it all. You might not hit that 50 pounds, but you know what? Maybe you put 30 pounds on it. Is that a failure? No, it's not a failure. So it's just building up that resiliency in our mind that I think training really, really helps with people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And to really, I want to clear up my point I was making from the sense of there's a third piece of that puzzle, right? So there's the work involved. There's understanding that you're not entitled or deserve anything at the end. Mm-hmm. But the third piece is what you added there in saying that the work gets you closer, right? The reps get you closer and closer on a daily basis. And that's the whole point of all of it anyways, right? The journey, right? We hear it all the time, whether it's from Alan Watts or Kobe Bryant or Jocko or Goggins or whoever we're hearing it from. The journey is the point, right? And it's important to, right? And I was asked on another podcast about, finding a true potential, right? How do I think about it, finding my true potential? And it's a very loaded question, but to me, your potential is consistently a moving target. And you just want to, and I think this is kind of where the lofty goals come into play, set a goal that, you can't necessarily achieve.
Right.
And I think a lot of that kind of gets lost of like, because sometimes people set an unrealistic goal. Yeah. Right. Like, I want to get into shape. Okay. So I'm going to set a goal to become Mr. Olympia. It's like, well, that's kind of a lost cause, right? Like, set something ambitious, but like, still do make it somewhat realistic, right?
If you're 39 years old, you're not going to.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. You're 39, you have 6 kids. Like, all right, that's not in your cards, but maybe running a marathon or an ultra or a triathlon or stepping on stage, whatever you want to do, right? But it's not necessarily really about the goal itself. It's about setting something that challenges you to show up and get the reps in and day out. That gets you closer to where you actually want to be, right? It gets you closer to discovering who you are as a person and what you're actually capable of long-term, right? And I think the more you figure out and the more you're able to continue to learn these things about yourself, the more you realize that, oh, well, there isn't actually an end point to this. And that's why I call it a moving target. Because as soon as you get close enough to smell the finish line, the finish line instantaneously moves because you move it. Because now you've realized along the way that you're capable of doing more. So why is that my end goal? Right. And so it just keeps doing that. And you never finish the race, but the race itself is the whole fucking point of this journey that we call life.
I mean, you brought up good. I think this is kind of a good way to kind of wrap things up, is that like that moving target, with every challenge that you're willing to put yourself through, you gain a new tool in your toolbox, right? And that potential that you thought you had before the challenge is not the same potential you now have, right? Because you had this mindset of this one outcome, right, that you can achieve. that was before you achieved this challenge that you set yourself for, right? You didn't think you could even get here, but you got here. So now that target moves, and it isn't a never ending pursuit. I mean, so many people are be like, do you think I've reached my genetic potential or all this stuff? You have no way of knowing unless you're willing to day in and day out, week after week, month after month, year after year, push yourself to those uncomfortable places and accept the challenges. Because that is what life is about. Life is not necessarily about this coziness and just, being in your comfortable zone. Life is about facing challenges, overcoming them, growing from them, and helping others grow from them, from your experiences too. And that moving target example, I think that's a great analogy. I mean, potential is only limited by how much effort we are willing to provide. 100%. So I do have one last question for you before we wrap this up. How do I grow a killer beard like that?
Get new parents. That's
Yeah,
my best answer.
I tried, and I tried so much, and I just get like, when it starts getting bigger, it looks like shit. So I just kind of keep it like this most of the time. But I told my wife, I want that.
Yeah, there is an awkward period. It's kind of like, like if you have super long hair and you cut all of it off, there's like a super awkward 6 months in there that you're just like, this is questionable. It's like, I don't think this is ever going to be what I want it to be. And then it just, slowly evolves and transforms into being like, okay, yeah. Again, it's kind of like our whole discussion, right? You don't quite know until you try, and then you realize like, oh, I had this beard potential in me the whole time.
You know what? Maybe I just ended my beard potential a little too early, and I need to give it another try. So
maybe if you see my brother, like my brother has, my beard, but in a different color, right? So it's like, I kind of just genetically have it from a beard sense. So I think I got lucky.
Rock the hell out of it. That's for sure. Awesome. Yeah. This was great. I think people are going to find this very, very useful. There's a lot of great things that we touched on. I know it wasn't as technical into the muscle building and all that, but I think the things that you mentioned, I think the discussions we got in could be very beneficial to people in the long run, because really the technical stuff isn't really the difficult part for most people. It's this up here, right? It's the brain. It's getting yourself to push past these limits, to understand that, the benefits other than just building muscle that weight training has for you, and just not settling on your perceived potential. All right. Your potential is based off of whatever sort of effort you're willing to give it. And I just thank you so much for coming on, man. Obviously I'm going to link all your stuff below, but where can people find you? Where can people get your book?
Yeah. So people can find me. I hang out on Instagram. So Austin Current on Instagram. If you type in Austin, AUSTIN, I'm the bearded fella that pops up with his arms crossed and my staple coaching power pose that we all do. No, but so yeah, I hang out on Instagram. It's a great place to find me and content, and really the links to everything are kind of that's that central hub. We have a lot of content on YouTube. So if you want to YouTube either Austin Current or YouTube Physique Development, that's our main hub of content. So there's a lot of, execution technique, workout style videos there that are there to teach and educate you. Those have empower you.
Even for someone like me who has a master's in this, like I still love watching all that. Like I pick up cues and stuff that like maybe I've forgotten or just maybe didn't know in the first place. So I think that's a great thing you guys do there.
Yeah, thank you. And then the book is on Amazon. That's the easiest place to get it. So search Science of Strength Training on Amazon, and it's a yellow covered book with a sort of like anatomy CGI illustrated person on the front, muscle man on the front, but it's a yellow cover, Science of Strength Training. And so you can get it on Amazon, or if you want to go on a scavenger hunt in person, you can find it at Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, Costco, Sam's. And that's all I know as of now. So
amazing.
Go on a scavenger hunt and find your own copy. And have fun.
I got to figure out how to do that. I just got mine going on Amazon, so I got to see how to get into those different places.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Well, I got super lucky with the publisher because Yeah, I mean, it's the publisher kind of, that isn't me, that's the publisher doing their thing. So that's kind of a
That's
fortunate
probably
thing.
my issue is I didn't go through like a big time publisher. So, but dude, I'm happy for you, all your success. Guys,
Thank you.
definitely go give Austin a follow. He's tremendous wealth of knowledge. And man, it's just been great to finally get to catch up in person or semi in person, whatever you want to call this, and just chat a little bit. I'd definitely love to have you back on and maybe talk a little bit more technicalities when it comes to hypertrophy and strength training and different movements and stuff like that. But this has been great. So I appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you. And guys, like always, please subscribe if you're on YouTube or if you're on iTunes or Spotify. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys are enjoying these interviews. I've been getting a lot of great feedback. So I got some more great guests coming on, but definitely share this episode because I think a lot of people need to hear what Austin had to say. So y'all take care. I'll be back with another episode soon.